Hey, greetings, everyone. Happy Thursday. Welcome to the Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit. Very glad to have you with me today. And we are just, I believe, 5 days out from the next election. And I'll tell you what, if you're like me, there's a sense of unease. You can look at the polls, and anybody who listens to this program knows which way I lean politically, so it's not a big surprise that I cast my ballot already and cast it for Joe Biden. But when you look at the numbers, it's always better to have a lead in the polls than to be behind in the polls. But going back to 2016, there's this sort of collective sense of unease amongst those on the left about what is going to happen in this election cycle here in the state of Michigan. Despite Joe Biden consistently polling between 8 and 10, sometimes 11 points in the lead, there is still a fear that we'll have a repeat of 2016. Well, my guest today is no stranger to being surprised on Election Day. His name is Tim Kiska. He, of course, is an associate professor at the University of Michigan Dearborn, professor of communication there. He also is a longtime journalist, a pollster. He's done all kinds of great work over the years. He is going to be watching the election results for the Detroit Free Press this time around, and he joins me right now. Tim, welcome to the program. It is a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for the invite.
Well, like I said, there is this sort of collective sense of unease amongst those, hoping that the polling is accurate this time around, more so than it was last time. And I guess we'll start with this one. I mean, 2016 caught a lot of people by surprise, you included.
Yes.
We thought it was going one way, and late votes came in, and they swung it the other way. Donald Trump ended up winning Michigan by 10,000 votes, 10,705, if I'm not mistaken. And, I mean, one of the closest elections in the history of the state. And a lot of people were caught by surprise, suggesting that the polling was inaccurate. And I want to ask you what you think was the fundamental problem with the polling data we were seeing 4 years ago.
I think it varies from pollster to pollster, but I think part of it is that it wasn't that far off. I think that I think a lot of them were saying about 3 points for Hillary Clinton, which was within the margin of error. I think what they missed was, by the way, there's one little stat that might end up being the key, which is that, Donald Trump, as you point out, won by 10,700 votes. Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate, got 50,000 votes. I'm not sure, I hope you don't get inundated by Green Party people calling, but I'm not sure they're going to have that kind of electoral strength this time around, as far as I can tell. So I think from there, I think part of it was just underestimating what the Green Party folks were going to do. I think the difference between then and now is I'm not sure that people who are voting for Donald Trump are in any way reticent about letting folks, including pollsters, know who they're going to vote for. I don't think so.
That's interesting. That's interesting because there were a lot of people suggesting that secret Trump voter was a big factor last time around and that they're still out there this time again. You don't sound convinced.
I don't think it's secret. I mean, I think that people, you drive around, I think we're both East Siders, you're seeing a lot of Trump signs. I think these people are going to vote for Trump. I think they're happy to let people know that's what they're going to do. And I don't think, now could be surprised, but I don't see that as a big deal this time around. I think people are saying, yeah, I'm voting for Trump, and that's all there is to that.
I also think a big difference this time around, Tim, is that, Trump is a known quantity this time. I mean, 4 years ago, he was still living off of the, Art of the Deal book and this reputation as being the savvy businessman, television star, successful guy. The Band-Aid's sort of been ripped off that a little bit, and people know exactly who he is now. And that changes the dynamic. His unfavorables are huge. They're Hillary Clinton level unfavorables.
Yeah. I think there's something a little bit different this time. I think the campaign is different. I mean, the Hillary Clinton campaign, I was on election night, when it became clear that this was going to be too close to call. I remember talking to a Democratic Party apparatchik who was going crazy. And his opening line was that campaign ought to be indicted for malfeasance. Right, because a lot of people, including Debbie Dingell, who's got a really keen ear to her constituency, were trying to tell the campaign, you were not catching on with my people. And what does she do? She shows up at a hamburger place on Michigan Avenue, doesn't hit a mosque, doesn't hit any UAW locals. I believe that you would know probably better than I. I think that was the only visit she made
Yeah,
to the state.
she was absent from the state for the last month of the campaign, at least.
That's right. And I think there were a lot of people on the ground in the Democratic Party who are kind of going, this ain't good. She wasn't listening. I think that they are listening now. I mean, every Democrat I talk to, they're, by the way, just like you. Boy, this is nerve-wracking. I don't know how this is going to turn out. We got to throw everything we have at it, and we can't quit until 8 o'clock on election night. So I think that's a big difference as well, too.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the polling data that we are seeing. And one of the fundamental differences, I think, between this cycle and last time is, obviously we had the big email drop right for the election. James Comey announcing that, of course, he was going to reopen the investigation into Hillary Clinton. And you saw her go from leads that Joe Biden is enjoying right now down to 3 points, just in about a 9-day span before the election. And so when election day came around, that lead was a lot narrower than what we're seeing for Joe Biden right now. And it's one of those things that I think there are a lot of people that flipped that lever and changed their mind as they were in the booth.
I'm sure that's true.
And so, that margin of error really came into play here. How much more confident are you in what we're seeing this time around than what we saw in 2016, or are you?
Well, as far as I can tell, and by the way, we're not going to know until Tuesday night or Wednesday or Thursday, or whatever day it is. We're not going to know until then. But I think there's a difference here in that, people seem to be, if they don't like Trump, they really don't like Trump. Ted Cruz said something like 2 years ago, probably the most honest thing he's ever said. He says, the Democrats are going to crawl over cut glass to vote for this guy, vote against this guy. That's what he said. And I'm seeing that more and more, particularly with mail-in ballots, where somebody will see something that he tweeted or something that he said, and they would go, God, that's it, end of story. I'm going to get my mail-in ballot, and by God, I'm going to vote. And I think that's the difference. I think that there's a lot more passion on both sides, where I didn't see much passion for Hillary last time around.
Yeah, and there's also a magic number that I'm looking at in a lot of these polls for Joe Biden that show him above 50%, and that's something that Hillary never accomplished. Even with the lead, there were still a number of undecided voters, which there just doesn't seem to be that many people left to sway at this point.
No, that may be different in the U.S. Senate race, God knows.
Yes. And I was going to get to that in a minute, but yeah, go ahead.
Right. But yeah, exactly. I think that, I don't know. I just haven't seen that many undecided at this point.
Well, you bring up the John James race, and I think that's important. John James versus Gary Peters here. That's a much closer race. That one is looking much more like a traditional Michigan race as opposed to Donald Trump. And it suggests to me, when I see a 3-4 point differential between those two and maybe a 6, 8, 10 point differential between the presidential candidates, that there is some ticket splitting going on in Michigan this time around. And you're not going to have as many Republicans going in and just pulling that straight party lever because they don't want to vote for the president, but they do want to see John James in the Senate. So, I think there are people that are looking to see if there's going to be some sort of balance here. Well, maybe we'll get a Republican in the Senate and we'll get rid of Trump at the top and get some sort of normalcy here.
Yeah, I can see a line of thought that you might. By the way, this state has a decades-long history of ticket splitting. We've done this for a long, long time. But I think it's more like I could see a line of thought where somebody is a kind of Republican, just doesn't like Democrats in general on principle, but really gets turned off by Trump. So they'll vote for Biden, but to redeem themselves in their own mind, they'll vote for John James. And I can see him picking up a few points that way too, I think. We'll see.
Well, Tim, one of the difficult things for you on election night, again, is going to be waiting for results to come in. The legislature gave a little bit of help to to election officials by allowing them to at least gather the ballots before the polls close and start to sort them. They can't count them, of course, until after the polls close.
Right.
Um, but
No, actually, that day, they can prove them that day, but they just can't release it till 8.
Exactly. So they can get a head start on it, which is a big deall
Right,
and that was
right.
something that they weren't going to be allowed to do. And obviously, this way we avoid some of the problems that we're seeing in places like Pennsylvania, and where the Supreme Court is weighing in on how late these ballots can be counted. Uh, we may get a result. We may get a result before dawn on Wednesday, but what's your confidence level that we will?
Actually, I'm on the phone, right before I got on the phone with a bunch of different clerks, and most of them seem to think, I mean, they're focused, and they're saying, we really want to roll this thing out. I was just talking to somebody in Portage, as a matter of fact, out in the western part of the state,
Kalamazoo.
Kalamazoo. Yep, exactly. And they said, no, we're going to be running it, but we're not going to let anything loose until 8. And you slimy bastards aren't going to call the election before 8, are you? And I said, no, I've been broken of that habit 4 years ago. Well, no, I didn't call it before 8, but anyhow, so a lot of them are saying, we think we've got our arms around this thing. Now, there might be a last second surge, but I think, by the way, you might see a surprise out of Detroit this time with the AVs coming out pretty quick. The state has kind of flooded the zone here in the city. You've got, I think it's in everybody's best interest that Detroit get done well and accurately, and they've got some pretty good people in there helping the city. All I can tell you is I've been dealing with Daniel Baxter, the elections director, for many, many, many years. And in some years you talk to him, and Daniel's tearing his hair out. This time he feels chill. He's confident. So we may get a surprise there.
Well, again, Jocelyn Benson sort of couched this in terms of we're going to go in and assist Detroit. I
Right.
don't have any official confirmation of this, but it certainly seems as if there was more than just a desire to help here. That this was,
Yeah.
Mayor Duggan and some
Yeah.
other folks saying this count needs to be good and it needs to be fair.
That's right. Exactly. And that could be the margin of victory. What happened, the turnout in Detroit. I mean, that could be a big factor. No, but my hat's off to everybody. I have a feeling that Janice Winfrey, I'm just not sure. I'm not an expert in her operations, but I have a feeling that she just didn't have the resources before, but she's got them now. I mean, my contact over there is a veteran PR guy named Matt Friedman,
Mm-hmm.
who's a total pro. And so when I have a question, instead of bugging Daniel, who's juggling everything, at the same time I talk to Matt, say, look, I need this, and this. Can you help me with this? And boom, it's done.
Well, we
So,
could go on about Matt Friedman's expertise for quite a while. He's been a friend of
but
mine
he's
for a
good.
long time as well. But
Yeah.
from your perspective, feeling comfortable in making a call in this election, what are you going to be looking for that's going to make you feel that, I can confidently make this prediction now as to who won the state of Michigan? And what's changed in the last 4 years?
Well, the big thing, and this is enormous, and this is the thing that literally keeps me up night, certainly kept me up last night and every night, is that mail-in AV ballot. Because typically we would send people, okay, our sample right now this year goes from the Ohio border in Monroe County all the way up to northwest of Marquette. We would normally send people right to the precinct, and at 8 o'clock, or whenever the last vote is cast, they press a button, give us a tape. They'd say, okay, Biden, X number of votes, Trump, number of votes. Well, great. But now with the mail-in vote, we're talking it could be 60% of the vote. And that's the trick this time around is, okay, I'm talking to folks and saying, okay, that's 60%, that particular precinct, where are you counting the AV? What time is it going to be ready? Where is it going to be ready? Is it going to be at City Hall or Township Hall? Is it going to be at the precinct? And I think that's going to complicate everything. And by the way, calling this thing, I'm not speaking for the Free Press at all. I mean, I'm working for them, but they've made an official decision, which personally I think is a wise one, that they're not going to press the button until AP, Associated Press, makes a they call it a declaration. They declare a winner, and so what that does personally, I love this decision because I mean, you've known me for a long time. I'm your basic fire horse. I got to be first. I don't want to be wrong ever, but I got to be first. And that's not a good thing, because if somebody gets this wrong this time, a news organization calls the wrong candidate, I think you're doing damage to democracy. Serious. I mean, I hope I'm not sounding over dramatic.
Oh, no.
But no, I mean, I think people, if hypothetically somebody calls Biden and it turns out to be Trump and the last votes counted, I think a lot of Trump voters go, see, I told you these guys are, cooking the books or whatever. So everybody's got to get it right.
But they've been saying that for 4 years, ever since. Say, look what happened last time. And I mean, what's your level of confidence in what we're seeing in polling? What have we done differently in the last 4 years in terms of making sure that we're reaching out to people with no landlines, again, cell phones, so they're being counted. Younger voters are being counted. How do we know that the polling data we're seeing is more accurate than we used to be able to get?
Well, I mean, I think some of I'm not sure how much they did this, but Steve Mitchell put out a poll last night, and he does nice work. And he got to the people under 45. He texted them, or the people texted him, which is an interesting way, because trying to get people under 45 on a landline, yeah, good luck.
Or even to pick up their cell phone. They won't do that either.
Well, yeah, exactly. So, he does they were doing the text thing. So I think people are a lot more wary. The pollsters saying, okay, that's, is everything, all the T's crossed, all the I's dotted. And I think that they're just operating a lot more conservatively this time around.
Well, and I mean, the concept of reading polls is one of those things. It's one of those things that does take some sort of analysis, because sometimes it's likely voters, other times it's eligible voters.
Yeah.
So many different questions that people should look at, and obviously have a huge boulder of salt that they can throw over their shoulder when they're taking a look at this kind of stuff.
Yes.
But likely voters. That seems to be something that's been upended this cycle, because I think there are a lot of people that are motivated to vote on both sides that haven't been out in a long time.
That's right. And that's what, the thing about polling, though, I think that, look, I think that the people, the ones who really work hard to do this well, and Bernie Porn over at Epic MRA, I put in this group, I mean, their reputation banks on getting this right. And that's why Bernie, stays up night making sure that these numbers are right. So, I mean, that's I can't think of a bigger motivation at this point.
I do want to ask you one thing about the profession in itself. I mean, because there are so many different polling organizations, and all of them are trying to market themselves as, well, this guy picked 4 of the last 6 elections correctly, or he only one to pick Trump was going to win last time around. And I mean, if you, as a voter, what advice would you give to somebody about weighting whether or not these polls are representative of what's really going on? Who's doing a good job? How can they determine that?
Well, one thing that I go on to 538.com, which is Nate Silver's website. Mm-hmm. If you take a look, like go into Michigan, I'm sure you have many, 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 many times. They've got, they keep track of the accuracy of these folks. So they will say, okay, Tim Kiska and Associates put out a poll, such and such and such, and his track record is a B- or whatever it is. And so they grade stuff. They keep track of who's right and who's wrong. That's what I do. I mean, they know what they're doing. They keep track of, it's almost like the batting average of these folks. And to me, that's helpful. The other thing is, you mentioned the grain of salt. You should take this with a grain of salt. Just bear in mind that these polls are a snapshot, sometimes it's a snapshot at a point in time. What's true today, on October 29th may not be true November 1st. So you got to keep an eye on that too. There are some people out there that, if they were honest, they'd say, well, we got to a bunch of Burger Kings, in Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, and this is what we found, actually this time around on election night, we're I'm a little bit less interested in, I want to make sure that the winner's right. But I'm looking at specific data from 80 precincts. I mean, I've got a clump of them that here's what I want to know. Stuff like precincts that were maybe in the Obama column in 08 in 012 and then swung hard to the Trump column in 16. What are they doing tonight? What's the turnout in some of these places? I've got a couple in one in East Lansing, one in Ann Arbor. Student precincts. What are they doing? I mean, what's the turnout there? That's the kind of thing we're looking at. I'm looking at geographic areas. What are the rural precincts doing? So,
Well, Tim, I mean, obviously the big change this time around was the voter reforms that were passed by the citizenry here in Michigan. And again,
that's right.
The vote, no reason absentee. I took advantage of that.
Yeah.
What do we know so far about, exactly? You haven't turned yours in yet, though. So
No.
I would definitely drop it off at your Dropbox.
End of the block. Yep.
There you go. Well, what are we expecting for turnout this time around? Because obviously, with the number of absentee ballot applications that went out and ballots that have gone out, those are huge numbers. Doesn't mean everybody's going to turn it in on time. Some of them may still show up at the polls to vote. What do we know at this point in time about what the traffic is going to be like on election day, or do we just no way to know?
We don't know. We just don't know. And that's one of the very first things I'm going to be looking at, because for each of these 80 precincts, I'm going to be looking at, okay, in-person vote that day, and then the number for AV, mail-in, AV, whatever you want to call it. And those may be drastically different. I mean, I may be, one thing I'll be looking at is if there's a precinct in, we've got a couple in Farmington Hills, by the way, is the in-person vote different from the AV vote? That's one thing I'm going to be very curious about. How does that work?
Well, and is this one of those things where after this election is done, there's going to be like a treasure trove of information that we can glean from this to really sort of reassess voting habits in the state?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, by the way, the reason I'm laughing is when it's done.
Well,
let me know.
Who knows? I
yeah,
put
right.
it this way. I'm assuming you have a change of clothes for election night when you're sitting there at the Free Press.
I do. And I just want to make sure I have enough of my charge card to get out of the parking lot, on the way out, whatever day that is.
Probably be cheaper to take an Uber, but you never know.
Right.
Well, Tim, we got to wrap it up here in just a couple of minutes here, but what is the one thing that you think is going to be potentially the biggest impediment to us getting results in a timely fashion? Because the longer this gets dragged out, the more people's faith in the system is going to be altered, frankly.
Well, I think the big problem is going to be processing those AV ballots, because these machines that they've got can only process a certain number of ballots per minute. I was talking to the clerk of Romulus. She's bought another machine for $35,000, by the way, so that she can get it through quicker. So I think that's going to be the biggest impediment right there, is actually physically running these things, and that's why it may take a bit.
Well, asking for patience from people after all we've been through in this election cycle is a lot. But I don't want to make you predict what time you should be able to call this, but guesstimates.
Well, if things go the way it seems that they're going to go, I mean, we're not going to call it until AP calls it.
Yeah.
And that's fine with me. By the way, I don't even get a vote in that, because even though I'm supplying them the data, I take that back. I make recommendations and they can follow them or not, but we're not going to do it until 8 o'clock or until AP says so. But I'm going to be curious what it looks like at 10. We're not going to say anything. Okay, what's it look like 10? I think by midnight, I think we're going to have a sizable chunk of the AV in. And if it's, as everybody's saying, if it's a 9-point Biden win in the state, I have a feeling if AP is looking at 9 points, they're going to do a declaration that Biden won the state. But believe me, after what happened 4 years ago, nobody is out there going to be playing cowboy, playing hero. They just aren't, because it's the stakes are too high.
Well, I fully expect you to keep me apprised of what you're seeing via text message that night. I promise I won't spill it to anybody, but no, I'm just
I
kidding.
will. No, I can do that. I mean, there are a handful of people that I'll talk to that I know that they're going to shut up. But, I know that, but the information is going into a vault. But I also like to hear from these are political prototypes. Democrats are hard work. By the way, I got a call from a guy that I talked to on election night, but the night before the election last time around, he said, look, this is what we're seeing, a Trump victory by about 8,000 votes.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, you must be insane. What are you talking about? Said, that's what we're saying. And well, there you go. So you talk to a wide variety of people, because believe me, the party's polling apparatus, I can't even imagine how sophisticated it is. So.
Well, very true. And that guy was right, whoever that person was. But
that's right. And you'll never know, because I too am a vault.
Well, very good. Tim, we look forward to seeing, what happens on election night. I think we as a nation will take a collective sigh when this is all over. Doesn't mean that things are going to go back to normal right away, but at least we'll know what we're dealing with going forward. And that's something that we have not had in quite a while. We appreciate your time, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the invite.
My name's M.L. Elric. I'm an investigative reporter and a connoisseur of fine yogurts. I know a little bit about Detroit, I know a little bit about deadlines, and I'm asking you to become a member of DeadlineDetroit.com. Like me, I'm not asking you to do anything I wouldn't do. I'm making a monthly donation. My wife is making a monthly donation. I know that seems redundant, but they need the money, and the money goes to a good place. Getting the story out, getting the truth out. Because if we don't support local journalism, there's some people a couple blocks away from here who are going to get away with a whole bunch of stuff that's going to cost you a whole lot more than just a few bucks out of your pocket every month. Go to DeadlineDetroit.com, become a member. You'll see it's really easy at the top of the website. Give early, give often, give generously. Just give a damn. That's the best way I know how.